Hello, everyone. Officially, welcome to today's webinar, Mobile Device Management and Cellular Spend Optimization. I'm Joel Anderson, VP of Marketing here at Tier4 Advisors, and I am pleased to introduce Kelly Higgins, our Senior Vice President of IT Solutions, who will be moderating today's panel, who we will be hearing from introductions momentarily. Two quick pieces of housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded and made available after today's session. And also, if you have interest in joining in today's conversation and asking a couple questions to our panel, please do so. Down at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A feature. So please type in a question, engage with our panel, and we will do our best to answer that during today's call. So Kelly, with that said, I will turn the time over to you and the rest of our panel.
Great, thanks Joel, and thanks to all of our attendees today. I'm Kelly Higgins, SVP of IT Solutions with Tier4 Advisors. And as Joel said, I think we have a great panel today to discuss mobile device management, cellular expense management, and some other areas in the mobility management space. But before I get started with some questions to the panelists, I'd like for each of them to introduce themselves and say a little bit about their company. So Mike, how about we start with you with Mobile Solutions?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Michael .sterl, President at Mobile Solutions. Quick overview, Mobile Solutions is a managed mobility provider. So think about anything mobile, optimization, security, and then ongoing management when it comes to your business needs.
Thank you. Mike. Justin, vMOX.
Absolutely. Justin Mincher here, Senior Channel Manager for vMOX. Thanks again for having all of us here today. As far as vMOX, we are a mobility expense and lifecycle management company. So we're built on technology that we've developed and patented in-house to simplify and hopefully automate all of these different things around mobility.
Thank you, Justin. And my colleague, esteemed colleague that is, Eric McVey.
Hey, yeah, thanks for joining. Thank you, Michael and Justin, for joining the panel today. We look forward to this conversation. We found out there's a lot of economics behind this, behind the technology that's really beneficial for our clients. And that is kind of my job, supporting Kelly, supporting our other regional presence around the country, in helping find the right solutions for our clients. And we pride ourselves on doing that. So thank you for joining. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Eric. So let's just jump into the questions. We're going to hear a lot of acronyms today in this space. And Mike, I would like for you to sort of demystify and help our attendees understand and define what is MDM, what is MMS, what is UEM, what do they all mean from a mobility standpoint?
Yeah, for sure, Kelly. So let's start at the top and really think through what managed mobility is. And the way that, I didn't make this up, so this is what Gartner actually classifies this as or defines. It's the business process services required to plan, procure, provision, activate, manage, secure, and support mobile devices. So that gives us really the lay of the land that we're all going after and trying to get our arms around, ultimately trying to support. But there's a couple of components in there that we want to outline. You mentioned UEM, which is more unified endpoint management. So think of this as an approach of securing and really controlling desktop computers, laptops, smartphones, tablets, from a single source or a single view, single pane of glass. That's the highest level. We call that really the umbrella view of that. And then traditionally what you've heard within UEM is mobile device management, which really refers, I would say, exclusively to managing mobile devices, and then enterprise mobility management, which is really focused on that additional infrastructure, maybe wireless access points or IoT devices. So if we take all those things and we roll those all up to what the go forward per Gartner plan is for mobility, it's really all things desktops, laptops, mobile devices, and ultimately how do we manage, how do we control those, and how do we focus on the overall user experience when it comes to those different devices.
Thank you. So speaking of devices, and Justin, I'll turn to you on this. What are the different phases of a mobile device life cycle? How do you support each function?
Yeah, so it begins at the point in which you're procuring some device, right? Whatever it happens to be. Again, if it's a cellular device, an IoT device, whatever the case happens to be. And so the support in that, from a vMOX perspective, is we integrate directly into the providers, in which case we can support from the order request through that procurement phase, provisioning and deprovisioning the device as it would go through its life cycle, managing those processes in the interim of the life cycle, right? So obviously, as any device is being used by a user, if there is troubleshooting, if there's things that just need assistance from a specific end user, all of that gets supported through to then what would be the end, which is or potential end of the life cycle, which is disabling that device, turning it off, turning it in, trading it in, whatever the case is, or then repurposing it, in which case it would continue its life cycle with a different user.
Thanks, Justin. And in my role at Tier 4, I personally helped a client transition to an MDM solution and expense management. They were strapped for resources to handle the mobility environment. So this was a huge time saver for them. But does an organization need internal resources to maintain a mobility management solution? Maybe Eric, do you have an experience there?
Yeah, it depends on really the size of the organization and the number of devices that are out there. And one of my past lives, there were, if everybody showed up, there were probably over 1,100 people, in the building at one time, and every one of them had a cell phone. And so this was before we knew about mobile device management and what have you. So we had to have internally some way to manage that group. And since I managed the help desk function as well as both all 4 data centers, we left that function with the help desk team, since they're touching all the desktop images, the laptop images, and so it was really easy to train them and put them on the deployment of the cell phones. Other organizations may not be as lucky, and that's why they would lean on somebody such as Mobile Solutions or vMOX to assist them with that endeavor, and kind of make it like we see other managed services, if you will, a utility-based model. They find that economics of that, or when you're paying for an SLA, it's a little bit better than having to worry about somebody being out sick, all the things that go on with running teams. So that's what I've seen happen in the past.
Thanks, Eric. Justin, anything else to add here? Good. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, you back? Okay.
I am sorry. I saw it blinking, but nonetheless. So yeah. So as it relates to the resources needed, this becomes kind of a where are we at today and where are we headed? And so depending on the organization and to the example that was given, right? Everyone has what their process is today. As a go forward, though, and certainly what our intentions are, is to streamline those processes so that every function has a policy, has a process, as if this happens, then this happens, so that things can start to be taken care of in automation. That being said, through the onboarding process, we certainly are going to work with a customer to determine, well, what does it look like if this is the request, if this comes up, right? What are those things? So from the resource perspective, absolutely need the resources during the onboarding to put those policies and permissions in place. But once that is done, the steady state going forward is where the real advantage is, because then there's not resources needed. At best, the resources are to have a recap call once a month or a quarterly business review or something like that. But from an actual, I need to be able to dedicate time every day, every week, every month, is not necessary.
Thanks. And looking at current events, especially in light of the of COVID-19, what do you guys see as challenges in the mobility environment, managing the mobility environment more importantly. Michael, I'll turn that over to you first.
Yeah, Kelly, I'll hit on the current, world order where we have COVID in place. And the way I see this is you either have companies, organizations that have corporate liable devices, so they own the device, they provide that to the end user, or bring your own device. And the way I'm looking at it is security first and then optimization second. And from a security standpoint, there's a way to control the corporate liable device, obviously adding a mobile device management application on it, pushing that out. But the reality is the BYOD component, you're not going to send thousands of devices out. It's too hard to manage. It's too expensive for the company. And so we have to start thinking about how to control those environments. And I think that's where, if I'm a business owner or IT manager, et cetera, I start to look at phase one of that strategy is let's secure those devices. Let's create those devices so that one, we can containerize what is personal versus corporate data, and use that as kind of an effective rollout strategy. So now we've given them a way to control the device, monitor the device, and then from there they can start to look at what to do, next on that roadmap. But I think the biggest really issue or challenge, as you put it, is for IT just to get their arms around what devices do employees have, what's connecting to the corporate environment, and then ultimately how do we lock that down in a step one, step two, step three process. And then from there, how do we develop really an ongoing, more proactive mobile strategy for the environment?
Eric, anything to add?
If I could find my mute button. No, my mind goes to, and I know we're going to touch on this a little bit, is actually the security of it. There's a special skill set needed there. When I think of, back in the day, I had one guy that worked for me that always liked the new tech. He wanted the latest, greatest phone. He figured out how to, I don't know if he built a back door or how he did it, but he was able to, with his smartphone, RDP and get into systems in the office to support systems and services that were going on down. So my mind always is focused on the security side, and that skill set may not be internal at your particular organization. So grabbing a partner that's well versed in that is the right way to go. It's a shortcut and it'll save you a lot of time, a lot of headache.
Thanks, Eric. And such an important topic. Justin, did you want to add anything from your perspective?
Yeah, what I would add, just in addition to, so I don't repeat anything, but the addition to the complexities that are certainly going on now more than ever, is as workforces are unfortunately shrinking and then hopefully starting to come back. And if companies are collecting equipment or repurposing equipment and so forth, right, not only do you have the physical aspect of that and how do you manage the logistics, but at the same token, then how do you seamlessly manage the costs associated to not only the logistics, but if we're talking about a cell phone or IoT devices that are out and you're collecting them back in, it's great, you have them in hand, you've taken care of the security piece and so forth, but how quickly are you removing those devices from your invoices? So you're not paying for them, even though you now have boxes of equipment that you didn't have yesterday. And so obviously that's just a whole new world for companies who are used to maybe dealing with that when, they hire a new person or someone turns in their notice and they've got 2 weeks to figure it out and so forth, to now some companies having hundreds or thousands of these incidences in a day.
So the time may be now, but at what point should a customer, look at strategy and be concerned about embarking on a mobility device management strategy or plan? Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Kelly, I think the time is now, and I mean that in as soon as you provide or allow access from any mobile device to communicate with anything corporate related, then you should have some sort of security policy in place. I mean, it's no different than having a house without a door lock on it. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. You're not building homes with just a door that's open whenever. It has a key, it has a lock, and that same thing applies to the mobility side of this. The other piece to that is we're really in a mobile first world. I mean, for the first time ever, we have more mobile devices than we do people. And so it just reiterates that if we continue to allow users to use mobile devices, whether corporate liable or bring your own device, the reality is we're just continuing to open up doors or access or vulnerabilities to the bad guys. And I think that's what we have to start to think about. If anything is mobile, laptops, mobile phones, or smartphones, tablets, IoT devices, then that next checkbox or dependency is implement security and figure out how to get that security strategy in place, and knowing that you can't do this all out of the gate. So it really is more of that crawl, walk, run design, but this should be at the top of the list for every organization when it comes to IT devices, employees, and the new world order that we're kind of operating in.
Right. And so when they have that realization, Justin, what do they need to look for in an MDM plan or MMS for that matter? What are those elements or features that they should look for in a product or offering?
Yeah, so I would say the key point is to really first do an internal assessment of what are the missing components or what are the key points, right? If you have an MDM in place today, then you might be looking for something else that it kind of does everything else, but isn't going to mess with your MDM, right? Resources are stretched, so forth. So understanding what the missing pieces are and what the heavy kind of, man hours are that are being absorbed today that you can offload. And so as an example, a lot of customers that come to vMOX, their key points is just trying to get as much work off of their plate as possible while trying to figure out how to connect all these different platforms that end up affecting their mobile solution. So for instance, we would integrate into an Active Directory to understand the employees, so that then when we're managing inventory, we know what devices belong to what employees. So then when we're provisioning or pushing licensing, we're connecting all of these dots simply because a request came from John Smith, right? There's all this work that would have had to have happened because you need to tie these pieces together. And now not only do your folks not have to do this work, but it's happening much quicker because it is happening through automation.
I got it. So when, we're talking about now with UEM, et cetera, all devices are sort of under this umbrella. When a company is selecting the devices to be used, what are the security concerns? And I think Eric talked a little bit about it, and some of you guys did as well. What are those key security concerns, and how can a company, an IT leader, tackle those? And I'll ask each one of y'all and start with Michael.
Yeah, and I'll just hit a quick one on this, Kelly. I think it's not so much the device, because the baseline, right, for the most part is they're either an iOS or an Android device, as we think about the simplicity of the mobility side of it. So I think it's, once we understand the device, smartphone, tablet, IoT, what UEM product can actually be supported on that device. But I think it comes back to what are the policies or the configurations you're looking to implement so that you choose the right UEM application to then apply to that device that you're selecting as the organization. So an instance where you have MiFis or some of these IoT devices that don't allow for a UEM, there's nothing you can do in that scenario for the UEM, but there are other applications that we've implemented or sold where it's more bandwidth manager configuration. So you're doing it more like almost like a virtual private network for that mobile device. So I don't think it's so much device specific, at least from my view, as it is what's the policy configuration, application, or the outcome you're ultimately seeking, and then align that to the correct UEM solution to help you drive that strategy forward.
Justin? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I didn't, Michael stirred a little thought in my head, which doesn't occur often, so I wanted to take advantage of it. So as you talk about through some of those complexities and what have you, I'm a company that's already got my deal with AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, whomever. I think I'm getting the best deal since sliced bread, right? But you know, one of the things I know both of you guys do, and I'd love to hear both of you speak of it, is if I'm looking to cut costs, which everybody's trying to do right now, what is that? You know, how do you help me do that as a client?
Yeah, so
Yeah, Justin, why don't you go
I'll pick
first?
it up to finish up on what Michael had said too. I completely agree. The literal device at the end is almost irrelevant to the equation. The exception would be if maybe it's a piece of outdated equipment that just isn't going to support the functions that you need, right? So obviously Apple just announced their new iOS on Monday. And so if they're going to discontinue certain security policies and updates, those are absolutely things that should be taken into account. But as a general statement, the in device is not nearly as important as understanding what are the policies, what are the provisions. And to be perfectly honest, there are kind of industry standards, right? If we want to call it that. And there's a lot of companies that kind of just go with whatever is working at the moment. And so we're certainly happy to help figure out what makes sense for them, right? If you're a, you know, and just using some customer examples here, if you're a defense contractor or a credit bureau, right, the security and what's even remotely going to be allowed near on that device is going to be something very different than if you're a retailer or something like that, where sure, it's IP, but it's not access to every consumer's social security number, right? Like it's just a completely different response there. So that's certainly the key in it. But as you were mentioning around the optimization, there's certainly a couple different ways to handle it. One way that a lot of people look at optimization is they think, well, discount, right? If I'm getting a good discount through my carrier, then I'm good, right? And so if I move my discount from 15 to 20%, then hey, that's awesome. I can easily quantify 5%. It's black and white. That being said, when we actually get into the world of optimization, what is real optimization? That's really driven by the ability to monitor an environment in real time and make adjustments to the plans or features based on actual consumption. And particularly using the environment with COVID, right? You may have been in a steady state for as long as you've been with an organization, and then all of a sudden a pandemic hits, which has not happened in our lifetime, and certainly not since mobile devices have been around, right? And all of a sudden, depending on your organization, maybe consumption went through the roof because you sent everybody home and they're all on their mobile devices, or it went through the floor because you furloughed a bunch of people, and so they're not using their devices until you call them back in a month or whatever the case is. But then when they come back and you see that spike happen again, right? That's where optimization comes from. That's where the bulk of the savings is, not in the fact that you managed to get 5% extra discount on, you know, whatever plans you happen to pick.
Yeah, and I'd layer one thing on to what Justin just outlined, which I would echo 100%. And I think where we find in the market with businesses, to Justin's point on discounts or even optimization in month one, the reality is this isn't a one-time move on. This is an ongoing, and you almost have to think about it as like an insurance policy. The reality is, my favorite is when companies are like, oh, well, once you right size it, we should be okay. And the reality of that is it wouldn't have gotten to where it is if someone was actually managing it. So I just want to echo that idea of once you optimize, it's not a one and done. It really is ongoing. It's a true management around it because there's, as Justin mentioned, there's processes, there's procurement, scenarios, there's devices, there's no use lines, there's suspended lines, there's features. There's so much activity that happens day in and day out that you really need that set of eyes on it. And I think that's where it loses its value when we come in and we just say, run an audit, save me money. It's, yes, I'm going to save you money, but I'm also trying to reposition your internal folks to be proactive on other company initiatives and less reactive on this, oh, mobility got thrown in my lap, what do I do? So just want to make sure that is clear to a lot of folks that it is a bigger picture, it is ongoing, and it truly is a strategy around what you should be doing with your business.
Thanks, Michael. And so you touched on some of those already, but what are the positive outcomes that a client is expected to see from embarking on this? Cost savings, Eric mentioned, efficiency, et cetera. Justin, can you outline some of those in your terms?
Yeah, and so obviously we can take the obvious, right? Save money, right? I feel like that's black and white at this point. But in addition to that, it's efficiencies, right? And so there's so many complexities around the mobile world that are even exist today. And I assure you, the ones that exist today, there will be more tomorrow and more next year, and so on and so forth. It is a ever-changing environment. A perfect example is if you have anyone that goes internationally or uses anything international, right? Now, are you GDPR compliant? Do you even know what that means? Because as a normal, you in your business, you don't really function, but you do have users that travel internationally, or whatever the case is. And so there's all these concerns that are ever evolving, and in the sense of even ever evolving, GDPR is a very good example there, because there is no final copy. They keep changing what that means to be in compliance. And if you're trying to manage data, right, which is what we're doing here, when you're trying to manage data, and you have to take into context not only your laws where you're at from a base standpoint, HQ perspective, but also where your users are at, it's just a whole different world. So if you can simplify all of the complexities that come down the road, because you're not responsible for being the expert for all of these different things, and folks like myself and Michael, we are, because this is our business, just like you have your core business. This is our business. We are going to be the best ones at that. So the time saving that goes into that, the liability that you just kind of, I know we're doing it right because we're being handled by someone who does this as their living, so on and so forth. Those are probably the biggest time savers and takeaways.
Yeah, and Kelly, I would add one thing, and Justin has a phenomenal example on just what we're doing, and again, echo that. And I think the one thing to add in there is, it's almost the low-hanging fruit, and that's this device reclamation component. And I laugh a little bit because generally we have devices, we throw them under the desk in a box, and they're just sitting there idle. Well, two things. One, there's dollars there, so there's an opportunity to recover some money. But then there's still data on those phones, and you as an organization have to think about, how do we get those devices? How do we send them back? How do we certify wipe the data off them? And then maybe we do put those, we restock those, or maybe we sell them in consignment. But that idea of any device that you've used that your employee is connected to your environment with, there is information on there, and there's an opportunity to cleanse that, and then obviously make some money if possible on those eligible devices. But just an easy one that very few companies actually even think about when they're rolling into, what do I do for managed mobility, and what does that look like for my environment?
Good stuff.
Isn't this also an opportunity, guys? From thinking from back in the old days on the other side of the desk is, I'd love things simple, love things standard. From a support perspective, this is an opportunity to standardize on one device or the other, eliminate iOS issues, or eliminate Android issues with some of the mobile apps that your particular company is having to use. So it's an opportunity to kind of consolidate and eliminate some of the noise in the environment that one of my good friends used to say he didn't like to have in his environment. He didn't like noise. So that's another opportunity to do that.
Well, Eric, to your point, I think the other side of that is we think about optimization and we look at it from a mobility standpoint, but we're in the middle of this transformation in general as a business, and we're having to replace on-premise phone systems. We're having to replace maybe legacy MPLS with public circuits and SD-WAN. So there's actually another side that says I can optimize it, get under control, and everything Justin outlined, but then take those savings and apply them to the other project within the organization. And I think we tend to forget about, it's not just mobility, it's not just internet, it's not just your UCaaS or CCaaS environment. Like, you have a lot of IT projects that you ultimately have to fund. And yes, we want to find savings, but we also want to organized savings that allow us to almost energize the next project that's in line. And that's an easy way to even start with mobility that most of us actually don't even think about out of the gate.
Good points. Thank you. So in terms of how to optimize all mobility costs, what are some of the ways a company can get the best service and tap into the latest technology while keeping costs down as well? So Justin, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it was started to be hinted to there in kind of just creating consistency and getting rid of the noise, right? And I'm sure Michael talked to it, but within vMOX, we have our own proprietary software that we use, and particularly a customer-facing portal, which we call the One Portal. And that's exactly what it does, right? It brings in, regardless of who your providers are, what the equipment is, how many different invoices you have, and so forth. And it brings all of this information together and in one place. And so then when you look at that from an alerting, reporting, analytics perspective, et cetera, all the information that was coming from a bunch of different places in different formats is now unified, right? And so not only are we achieving the hard dollar savings of the optimization that we've already talked about, so I'll spare you on, but now we're getting into those soft dollar savings and the fact that I don't have to run reports across 3 different platforms and try and aggregate that data together. And then, well, how do I do cost allocation to get it back out and charge departments or cost centers or whatever the case is going to be, right? You have all this wonderfully unified data, and especially for those customers that are global, if you still have this single portal that then supports different currencies and languages, and yet it's the same portal that everyone around the world in your organization is using, it's just going to be a night and day difference. And so when you take into the account all of that simplicity, even if there are still manual tasks that someone is doing, right? I'm still going to go pull a report because I want to look at it, right? The amount of time that it's going to take to achieve the same knowledge, right? I need to know X, so I have to go gather this information, is going to take a fraction of the time. And those are soft dollar savings that are just going to multiply out every single time that thought alone occurs.
Thank you. So looking at, both your companies can help save on cellular expense. Can both of you provide some background on the steps a client goes through, how painful or painless it can be, information needed, et cetera, to take advantage of these expense savings?
Yeah.
Michael, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and this is probably for Justin as well, it's, access to the data, whether it's invoices or connecting via API to the carriers for those accounts, for those customer accounts. I would say the process is simple. The way I look at it, we'll call it a 1, 2, 3 process. But I think the challenge, if I look at it, is ultimately what's our end goal. And I think a lot of customers fail at recognizing what are we really trying to get out of this. And if we understand what the end result will be, then we can navigate, through those steps, whether that's the optimization side, we connect our proprietary platform to the carriers, we extract, we transform and kind of load that data into our platform. And then we start to look at it from a normalized view. I mean, that's as easy as logging into a portal. So pretty straightforward. Again, I think we tend to focus on what are the pain points, what's the end goal. And once we have that, then the actual integration layer is pretty seamless from our view.
Yeah, and so to pick up from there, and I want to oversimplify the question, so please feel free to correct me if I am here. But so if the question is, I have an environment today, where do I go to get started, and how do I figure out, what is the impact going to be to me, and what does that look like? And if that's the direct question, it's a relatively short answer, which is that we would ask to collect the last 3 bill cycles of billing data. So just the carrier PDF invoice is very simple. Once that data is sent over, we would run it through our system as if you were a vMOX customer, at which point it would spit out the results and say, well, if you were, this is what we would have done, and that would equal X dollars. The whole process there, you know, it should hopefully take 5 or 10 minutes to pull your carrier invoices. Hopefully that's not a complicated process for the right person anyway. But so once we have that data over, it goes into one of our queues for our operations folks to put that information into our system. So once we have the data, it's maybe 2 or 3 business days for us to turn around and say, here's what we would have done and here's what that financial impact would look like, at which point we would get on a call to discuss that. So 5 or 10 minutes on a customer side to pull the data, 2 or 3 business days for us to run through the assessment and jump back on a call to review. Very straightforward. And at that point, there's some real numbers, there's some tangible information to decide, is this worth continuing the conversation?
And Justin, your point on the 5 minutes is if they remember their password, right?
So I said for the right.
That's it.
And so it's somewhat low risk, as you're saying, Justin, right? Good deal. So, and there's a little storm here just in case I happen to lose power, by the way. So we've talked some about BYOD. I'm going to ask Michael this question. So what are the pros and cons of a BYOD approach? That is, bring your own device. Large organizations seem to be going to that in some cases, offering maybe a stipend to employees or saying you're on your own, we're no longer providing devices, et cetera. So what are the pros and cons to that approach?
So Kelly, I look at it as really Coke and Pepsi. Which one do you prefer to drink at the end of the day? And you being in Atlanta, probably Coke, so we can't have that conversation with you. But I really think it's that. I think it really comes down to what's the initiative from the organization. Is it, you know, if I think of it from a security standpoint, I can lock both scenarios down with the UEM solution. So I've kind of, the technology has kind of simplified that aspect. I think it comes down to something that, you know, Justin and I have both kind of mentioned, and it's the visibility. What type of visibility are you looking for in those devices? Do we want to see all the data usage or, you know, manage the international calling, things like that? Because when you think of BYOD, really what you're losing is authorization to make changes or have authorization to have visibility into those devices and what they're being used for on a data plan or per minute type SMS scenario. So I don't think it's right or wrong. I think we're going to continue to see this go back and forth. I think COVID actually will almost drive more of a BYOD environment. That's my view. As we continue to have more work from home, we don't have the expense, and I think to Justin's earlier statement of tracking devices and where they're coming from. So I think the idea of either one and just making sure that, you know, it's a good fit for the environment you're ultimately going after, and you just have, again, you have a strategy and you have policies to support it either way.
Great, thank you. Eric, did you have anything to chime in here? I know in your previous career, you've led some of these organizations that maybe have done BYOD. Sure, if Eric's
on mute.
On mute.
Unmute myself. Okay, sorry. I've seen that in good and bad, right? A lot of organizations won't take the time to go talk to vMOX or mobile solutions, or right, and get the right pricing for their organization. They think it's just easy to go write a $50 check a month as a stipend, and they solve the problem that way. But it's really kind of kicking the can down the road. Personally, I get jazzed about saving money. Not that that's the number one thing here, but for me, it is the number one thing. I always thought it was interesting when we first started talking to mobile and to vMOX was that, and I didn't really realize this, and more for us personally, because all 5 of us here have cell phones, right? That the carriers, you know, they'll come in with 4 or 5 different plans for your organization, and it's a guess. it's a range of plans for data usage and feature function, etc. But what they don't tell you is there's literally hundreds of plans out there. And what partners like vMOX and Mobile Solutions, their claim to fame, and why I get jazzed about it was because with that portal that Justin mentioned and Michael's mentioned as well, very quickly they can identify those percent savings right off the bat. No change in service, no change in devices whatsoever. So it's really it's really one of those things that's almost a no-brainer to think about.
Yeah.
BYOD complicates the environment. I know everybody wants freedom. I already mentioned that I'm a standardization kind of guy. I like it simple. So, it's kind of up to the organization in that, but I see complexity there.
All right, thanks, Eric. So let's fast forward to our providers here. You've got a client, you're examining their needs. How do you determine that they're a fit for your services? And I'll let Justin start.
Yeah, so the first, as simple as it is to determine if they're a fit is really, again, by doing the assessment, right? That is kind of the out of the gate. It's very quick, very easy, hopefully painless if you know your password to your carrier portals and so forth. But so in that event for vMOX specifically, we support corporate liable environments. And so as long as you have a corporate liable environment, you can gather the bills and send those over. It's at least worth the conversation and figuring out what those next steps look like. We have no scalability issues. So we have customers that have hundreds of lines up to hundreds of thousands of lines in a single environment. And of course, ranging the gamut from traditional devices into IoT and machine-to-machine devices. So there's really no way to kind of rule out someone in that instance.
Yeah, Michael, anything to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would add, no, you're good. The only thing, I would add to that from our side is we try to stay around that minimum of 100 devices or more, tablets, smartphones. We tend to see that from a cost standpoint or what the customers are most likely willing to consume dollar-wise. For us, it's really three different pillars we kind of look at. Is the customer looking for optimization, as Justin kind of outlined, saving money, and we can connect and do that. Are they looking for more of a secure environment? So we start to look at, do you have an existing UEM application already in place, but you don't know how to manage it? We can help you there. Or do you want to implement a security policy and you want us to manage everything licensed and ongoing? And then that third would be if customers looking for device reclamation services, or under that kind of managed component, they're looking for staging and kitting. So do they have field requirements? We have field employees. We need to send them devices with some sort of accessory, or they want us to manage the inventory for them. So we kind of go into it with a three-pronged approach, try to better, again, understand what the current customer challenges are, and then from there be able to implement the solution that best supports them going forward.
Great, thank you. So we only have a couple of minutes left, and Michael, while you're still on here, and then I'll ask Justin, give us a success story. How have you helped a client?
Yeah,
Quickly.
Success story. I'm going to combine it with secure and an optimize. You have 6,000 devices, tablets that you're trying to roll an application, a standardized application, to Eric's point, and they didn't have a clean way to do that. We were able to add in a UEM solution. That solution was 42 gears, so we were able to deploy the UEM environment that supported their app for all their remote that needed to be HIPAA compliant as well. So more of that healthcare industry. And once we did that, we were then able to connect to them and optimize the Verizon AT&T spend. As you can imagine, these devices are almost set up with a primary, secondary, so a Wi-Fi enabled, but also one of the carriers for data. And so we were able to look at how they were consuming the data, how to prioritize that connectivity, and then ultimately optimize the spend on a per device environment. So again, creating a really true managed mobility solution that they needed in their environment.
Thank you. Justin, again, quickly, and we'll turn it back over to Joel after.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a customer that came to a close right at the beginning of COVID, actually talking about the environment, and a big part of what motivated them to move so quickly was obviously knowing that they were getting ready to send employees home and they were going to have fewer employees and so forth. And so they wanted to get as much off their hands as they possibly could to kind of successfully make that transition. And so from contract to sub 30 days, is about 27 days, we were able to onboard the customer, which included doing their optimization while also integrating into ServiceNow as their ticket system, ADP as their source of truth for their employee data, SAP for their financial reporting. And so we were able to literally take over their entire process of the lifecycle management while saving them money in sub 30 days. So it was just a huge win, and kind of, again, the timing was just perfect.
Great. Well, I want to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the attendees, and look forward to the next one. Joel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Justin and Michael.
Yeah, Justin, Michael, thanks for joining us. Kelly, thanks for moderating. Eric, thanks for your input as well. Mobile device management and cellular spend optimization, truly worth a deeper dive and look for your organization. If you would like to have a further conversation with either one of these folks or a Tier 4 Advisors team member, please reach out to a Tier 4 Advisors team member that you know, or visit tier4advisors.com, and we'd gladly be able to facilitate an introduction to our panelists here. We look forward to you joining us next week for our next week's webinar, Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, around creating a dynamic workforce, when to outsource versus insource. Should be a very unique conversation. So we will see you all next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Take care, everyone.